the message. Offending somebody is one thing. Convicting them is a different story. I don't ever want to offend somebody. But if there are people, maybe some here that have just come back once or twice and it's a whole lot easier to stay home, or people watching on video that it's just so convenient right now to stay where you are. I don't want to offend anybody, but if I could almost, it'd be like putting some sand in your shoe and make you a little bit uncomfortable. Think about it that way, maybe. And the question I'm going to get to is, why is being here so important? And I'm going to answer it with about 8 or 9 or 10 different reasons. And I'm going to have to go quickly, I promise you. We're not going to be here till late, I promise you. But that's the question I want you to have in your mind. Why is being here in the presence of other people, why is literally, physically being in church really that important? And I say that realizing there are people at home that should not be here because they have sickness or that they have reasons that should prevent them from being among other people. And I understand that there are people that are home that cannot be here. There are people that should not be here, maybe because they're home taking care of somebody that cannot be here. And I also understand that there are people that just choose to not be here for dozens and dozens of different reasons. It's so convenient to stay home. It's too easy to stay home with the technology of watching church on TV. And I know there are churches that a year ago made a deliberate decision to not put their churches on video because it would be too easy for people to not come back. I'm glad we didn't do that. I'm glad we have video right now because there will always be homebound members for whatever reason. And I hope that they take advantage of the technology that we have today. And maybe some stranger just hears about church and they tune into ours and they benefit from it some way. I hope that happens. But the question I want to ask today is, why is being in church, getting up, getting out of bed, and making your way to this church or to whatever church you go to, why is being here really that important? I'm just going to answer that. Why is being here that important? First reason, Jesus designed Christianity around gatherings. In the Old Testament, it was called the assembly. Read about Moses and the times he gathered the people. It was called the assembly. That Old Testament word is taken over into the New Testament, and the Greek word is ekklesia, which literally means the ones called out. And that the translators have taken that Greek word ekklesia and put it into the English as the word church. And we are literally the ones called out of the world and called together on Sunday mornings. We are the church. The math is really quite simple. Gathering here is good for you. Not gathering here is not. And it really couldn't get any simpler than that. To refuse, and that allows people off the hook that can't be here, that shouldn't be here, that for whatever reason, work or sickness or whatever, that cannot be here. That's taking a lot of people off the hook and giving them an excuse, a temporary reason. But for those who refuse to be here, it is not good for them spiritually. For those who choose to be here, it is good for you. And it couldn't get any simpler than that. So let me continue. Why is it important that we gather here? Because it awakens us. It makes us realize that the past 5 or 6 days have kind of clouded us to spiritual things. The past week has clouded us and fogged up our minds to the things of God. And we begin to think more about more along the lines of what we've heard rather than along the lines of what we should know. There's a passage from the book of Psalms that says it like this. I'm not going to give you time to turn to it. You can take notes. You can ask me later. Psalm 73, it says it like this. As for me, my feet came close to stumbling. My steps had almost slipped. I was envious of the arrogant, and I saw the prosperity of the wicked. There's no anxiety in their lives. He saw the wicked, he saw the evil, and all they did was succeed. And he scratched his head, and he couldn't understand why things were like that. The passage continues in Psalm 73, and he says, when I stopped to understand this, I was troubled in my heart until I came into the sanctuary of God. And then I perceived their end. Then I began to get clarity of mind. Coming to church clears our mind to think biblically instead of worldly, which we're exposed to 5-6 days of the week. But when we show up here, we are allowed to think biblically. It gives us a proper perspective of God. It gives us a proper perspective of our world. Why is it important that we gather here? Because it literally helps advance our salvation. And I say that carefully. I want you to listen carefully. Being here physically helps advance the progress of our salvation. It helps us become conformed to being more and more Christ-like all the time. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 says it like this. We all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of God, are being transformed. It's a process into the image of Jesus Christ. And being here in a physical way helps and aids that process of being transformed into what God wants us to be. It won't happen the way it should if you refuse to be here when you can. There's just no way it can happen. Gathering here is good for you. Refusing to gather here is not good for you. So why should we be here? Simplest answer is because we're told to be here. You guys have heard this before. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, like some have the habit of doing. We are told to be here. This isn't just a byproduct of our personal faith in Christ. This isn't what we are doing right here this morning. This isn't just something extra that we offer in case you want to do this. This is one of the main parts of Christianity and the Christian life and following Jesus Christ. In the Old Testament, it was called the assembly. In the New Testament, you don't read the letters of Paul and see them written to one individual other than Timothy, and there are certain reasons, and other than to Titus, and that's for a specific reason. You read the letter written to the church at Philippi. You read the letter to the church at Colossae. You read the letters to the people that gathered together to worship Jesus Christ. This is an important thing that we do. Some of us do it almost by habit now, and in a way that's a good thing. That this is a habit that we are involved in. We do this because we are told to do it. There is something very real about being in the presence of others. One of the verses I just read said it like this: let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. So as you look around the congregation this morning, you see people that are hurting. You see people that haven't been here in a while. You see people that are struggling. You see people that are celebrating something. And the verse says, let us put some thought into how we can encourage somebody else to love better and to do better. In other words, you have a responsibility to somebody else in this room. There's no way around it. And somebody in this room has a responsibility to you. There is something very real about being in the presence of other believers. I talked to a friend of mine several months ago. I grew up with him, and we'd gone our separate ways and just disappeared. I got a note from him, then we touched base and we texted each other. We talked a couple of times. He lives in Philadelphia. He is the head of the pediatric, maybe I've mentioned this before. He is the head of the pediatric eye department at Philadelphia Children's Hospital. I came from good stock way back when. He is the head honcho at Philadelphia Children's Hospital. I was talking to him on the phone, lives in Philadelphia, and he's of another denomination. We were talking about this crazy world, and what he said kind of caught me off guard, but then I did my homework and realized what he was saying. He said, we haven't been to church yet in a long time, and this was after we had been gathering. He said, back here, back east, we haven't been able to gather, and he said, I really, really miss the passing of the peace. And we kept talking, and I thought about what he was talking about, and I had to go do my homework. And there are denominations, and what they call it is the passing of the peace. And at certain times in their worship service, and it's a little more rigid than us Baptists are used to, they will turn to one another, to the people that are seated right beside them or right behind them, and they'll say something like, one will say to the other, the peace of God be with you. And that person will respond and say, and may he be with you also. The Southern Baptist version of that is just us shaking hands or hugging each other. We're like we're at a long-lost family reunion. But the same idea. And this friend of mine was just telling me he really, really missed sitting in a pew and turning to somebody that he knows or maybe somebody he doesn't know and saying, the peace of God be with you, and receiving in return, and the peace of God be upon you also. There's something very real about being here with other people. It's important. There's something valuable to this. And I know there are people watching on TV or on their tablet or on their smartphone that maybe are upset because they can't be here, and I hope you're not upset with me because of what I'm saying. There are legitimate reasons to not be in church. There are also a lot of illegitimate reasons to not be here, and I'll just leave it at that. Why should we be here? Because this place is called a family. I call us a church family. The Bible does that too. The church is not a building, it is not a program, it is a family. We call ourselves brothers and sisters. Is there a reason? It's because we're a family. 1 John says, see what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. Ephesians says, you are no longer strangers and aliens, but fellow citizens with the saints, and you are members of God's household. I don't know about you, but if you live under one roof with somebody, you're family. And that's what we are. And there is an important reason to gather together, and it's because we are family. Why should we gather together? We need to be reminded of who we are. We need to be reminded of whose we are. Psalm 100 says, we are his people. We are the sheep of his pasture. And sometimes we're only reminded of that when we gather together. We get so busy going to work, we get busy going to school, we get busy with life. It just dominates our time. Imagine that. But sometimes when we show up here, we can look around at other people. We can look around at the cross, the songs that we sing, just the moments that we have here, and we were reminded once again of who we are. Fellow citizens, members of God's family, we are reminded of whose we are, that we belong to God himself. Why do we do this? Not because gathering together is just a nice or fun thing to do, but there are certain things that can only be done together. Let me say this. There are certain things that the Bible commands that can only be done like this morning. If you read 1 Corinthians 10 and 11, I think it is, it talks about the Lord's Supper. And again, I say this carefully. Can you take the Lord's Supper at home? Have homebound people taken the Lord's Supper at home by themselves? Yes, they have. Yes, they have. And they've honored God at that moment. And I think God has honored them. But I think the emphasis of the Lord's Supper is to do that together, to look around as we observe communion and as we eat that bread and as we drink that juice, that we do it together. I think that's what the Bible emphasizes. There's a passage in Colossians, if I can find it quickly. The passage says it like this, Colossians chapter 3, verse 16. Let the word of Christ richly dwell in you with all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another with psalms, hymns, and in spiritual songs, singing with thankfulness in your heart to God. You can't do that verse seated in your living room by yourself. It's impossible. Teaching and admonishing one another as you sing, as you celebrate. There are certain things that we can only do when we gather together. Is this place important? You bet it is. Why do we gather together? As a reminder to each of us that you are not alone serving Jesus Christ. Because I know there are some people in our congregation that they're the only family member that came to church today. There are people in our congregation, they're the only Christian in their office or the only Christian in their circle that they, maybe at school or wherever they happen to be. You're the only Christian, and sometimes it might seem like you're the only one in the world, and you show up today and you realize that you are not alone. I love the story of Elisha. I think it's in 2 Kings. I should have looked it up. Elisha, when he's scared to death, he and his servant, until God opens their eyes to the armies of God that are literally surrounding them. They are reminded that they are not alone. Why should we meet like this? Why should we gather like this? Because it's a reminder to us of the heroes of the faith. Listen very carefully. I'm not talking about Moses and Abraham and Paul and Peter. I'm not talking about and those are the heroes of faith. I'm talking about the heroes of the faith that you passed as you came in, that you sit in front of them or behind them. And there are people in this church and in churches everywhere right now that I really, really, really consider heroes of the faith. There are families that struggle every Sunday morning to get everybody together and get here because they consider this place important. And it would be so much easier to just stay at home. There are people that every Sunday morning they get up and that they fight. There are adults that fight with somebody that they wake them up. They say, it's Sunday, we've got to go to church. Today you've had one less hour of sleep and we got to get up and you got to go to church. And they get somebody dressed and they put one black shoe on and they can't find the other black shoe, and then they realize they can't find the other black shoe, so they got to change to brown shoes and change the whole outfit. And by that time somebody's crying because they had to eat Rice Krispies instead of Cocoa Puffs, and it's just a struggle to get to church. And I'm just talking about Susan trying to get me ready, much less somebody with little kids. We don't realize how easy it is to just wake up, get out of bed, get dressed, and go to church. And those people with little kids that struggle and they cry every time, I don't want to go to church. And the parent is saying, it's important that we do this. And those people that are responsible for getting somebody else to church, those are heroes. Because it is so much easier to stay home. There are heroes that come to church because they make sure their whole family shows up. As an encouragement, as an example to all of us. You know, some of the heroes in church are those that have been here forever. Let me give you an example from my home church. When I was, and I went to one church till I left home. And there were people that went to that church when I was young, and they still went to that church when I was a teenager. And then when I left and went away to college, and I moved and went to graduate school and got married. And so often when we would go home to visit my family, our traveling was on the weekend. So Sunday, we were either going or coming home back this way. And so there was a lot of times when we wouldn't go to church with my mom and dad. Occasionally, we would be there on the weekend, and mom and dad would always go to church, so we would go with them, and I would go back to that same church. And I would look around, and like seated over on this side somewhere was Mr. and Mrs. Witt, and these are real people. An older couple, and they're seated behind the youth area. And they're still sitting there because that's where they always sat, because they had like 4 or 5 kids growing up. And they always sat behind their kids in the youth group so he could reach up and thump their kids if they were acting up, or whoever was sitting near his kids. And they are still there. One of the last times we went to church in Albuquerque, I passed this lady in the hallway, Mrs. May. She was one of those people, she was old when I was there, young. And she's like 130 now or something, and she's still there. It's still important for her to get up and go to church and show up. There was a man that I remember, he was called on to pray like every month at least, and the preachers always just said, Colonel Small, will you pray? He was a short man. He was about as wide as he was tall. He was bald as I am. And he would pray wonderful prayers just about every month. And they always called him Colonel Small. I just thought it was a nickname. Until I realized later he was a full bird colonel in one of the branches of the military. And he died long after I left. But he was always there. There are people in this congregation that have been here forever, and they will be here until they die. And so I would encourage some of you that are younger to look around and pick out some people and look for them. It doesn't mean they're going to be here every single Sunday, but it means they're going to be here all the time, if that makes sense. And some of you young people, you're going to move off and go to college. You're going to move away, but you're going to come back and visit your mom and dad, and you're going to go to church with them. And I want you to look around and look for those people, because I guarantee you some of those people will still be seated wherever their pew is. They will still be in that pew. And it's important for us to be here to see some of those heroes of the faith, those people that make it a point to be here all the time. You know who some of the heroes of the faith are? They are those people who have to walk in this church all by themselves. Gone to church all their life with somebody. Started out with a spouse, grew to a family, family disappears, they still come to church with just their spouse, and now they come all by themselves. All the rest of us walk up to church with somebody. We walk into church with family, with somebody, and we just walk in and say, where do you want to sit? And as soon as you sit down with somebody, you're seated next to somebody. And it's even family or a very close friend, which makes it comfortable. There are people that walk up to that door all by themselves. And they walk in this congregation, they look around, and they might have a familiar spot they usually sit. They walk in today, and somebody's already seated there, and they got to look around and figure out where else they're going to sit. They look for somebody familiar, maybe that'll welcome them. I can't imagine how hard it would be to get up and do something you've done all your life with somebody, and now do it all by yourself. But you know what? They show up, and they're here because this place is important to them. And doing this is important. And a change of life, change of circumstances doesn't change their commitment to this place. Those are real heroes. Why do we come? Because you can see literal heroes of the faith. Why do we gather together? Because we're family, because we're a church, because we're called out. Because by doing this, we are a witness to other people. There are people that are driving by our church as we're in here, and they look and they see a parking lot with a bunch of cars, and they realize there's people in here. And whether it makes a difference or not, we are a witness to those people that this place is important to us. Nobody go anywhere, because I'm going to speak to those people for just a moment. To you that watch this on a smartphone or your TV or a tablet, I don't want to offend you, but I want to invite you here. Maybe you're waiting to get the vaccine, and that's fine, I understand. You're welcome to come and wear a mask. You're welcome to come and not wear a mask. You're welcome to come and find a new place to sit and maybe find your old place still reserved for you. Nobody will say a word to you about not being here. Somebody will welcome you, I promise. And to all of you that are seated here, when somebody comes in that hasn't been here in months and months and maybe even a year, they're nervous when they walk in that door. And even in a joking way, you better not say something sarcastic to them, or you better just hug their neck or shake their hand. Or if they're nervous, just stand back and say, I'm glad you're here. And welcome them back home, because that's what this place is. To us that have been here almost a year now, or 10 months or whatever it's been, to those that have not come back yet. I talked to one person one time. They came to church one time, and they got very emotional. And they literally, I could see their eyes glancing behind me as they were looking at me. And this person said, I'm so scared to be here. And on the one hand, I wanted to say, put a mask on, wash your hands. I wanted to say that. But on the other hand, I understood exactly what this person was saying. Because there are people that are scared about that virus and what it can do to individuals and what it can do to families. So I did understand. So when that person walks in, you that are sitting here better just say, I have missed you, and it's good to see you back. What we do gathering here together is not just an afterthought. It is a vital part to us all becoming more and more Christ-like. It is a vital part of us considering each other family. It's a vital part of our witness to get out of bed, show up here, when it would be so easy to do something else instead. So you people that have been here forever, thank you for being the witness to those of us that are coming behind you. To you young people, that teenagers, 20s, young adult, you might be the only person that comes from your family. If my parents had not brought me to church when I was a teenager, I guarantee you I wouldn't have gone. There is no way. But there are teenagers that show up to church by themselves, and I have no idea why. But I am so glad they do. And it doesn't take an older person to be an encouragement to a younger person. Young people can be an encouragement and an inspiration to us older people. I'll see young adults walk in that are like 20 or 22 or something, and they walk in by themselves. They're at that stage of life where they're trying to make decisions that are going to affect the rest of their lives. They're trying to figure out what they want to be, and they show up by themselves. And I just want to say, God bless you, because most of your age don't do this. When kids finish high school, they drop out of church at a rate that is scary dangerous. We have some in this church that continue to show up. We need to welcome them and consider them the most important part of our family. This is not just an afterthought, but this is one of the most vital aspects of following Jesus Christ. Getting out of bed, showing up to church, singing when the songs are sung, or just standing there with your mouth shut, listening as other people sing around you. Opening your Bible and listening to me as I try to explain something from it. Looking around, and if you're worried and just recognizing people and say, good to see you, good to see you. And if it doesn't scare you, you shake hands and you hug and whatever else you want to do. This place is more important than we realize. And I hope we've begun to realize that this year. I don't know how to offer an invitation here, but I'm going to. This invitation is for you that God has spoken to your heart in some way. Maybe today, maybe last week. No idea. I'm going to ask Leah to come, and I'm going to ask Kathy to come. I'm going to ask you to sit right where you are. And it's Leah plays and Kathy sings. If God has spoken to your heart in some way, at some time, and you need to respond in some manner, that's what this moment is for. Would you bow your heads? Father, for this invitation I pray that we give you free reign in our lives. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
Guys, so much. It is good to see you here. It really, really is. Please don't forget that this is spring break and a lot of people are off and doing fun things, and that's awesome. But there is a shower today right here at our church at what time? 1:30. If you are part of that shower, if you want to come to that shower, if you want to honor this family with a little girl that's on her way in about a month or sort of, two older brothers are going to love this little girl. That shower is at 1:30 today. And so don't forget that. There is other stuff going on. And as just to honor our church, and some did this several months ago, just as a reminder of what we have here at our church. A bunch of water bottles were ordered. Everybody carries around a water bottle these days. At least they should, and I'm speaking to myself. Everybody carries around a water bottle. As you walk out, just to the left on that table, there are water bottles with Pinecrest on them. Grab one or two or however many you got in your family. We got more if we run out, and we'll put them out. Just a reminder that this place is important to me, and it's important to you, and it's a great place to be a part of. So grab a couple of those on your way out and tell God sometime today or this week how grateful you are for this place here and what it means to you in your life. Any other announcements? Anybody, anything? Youth fundraiser are doing t-shirts. If you got questions, find Drew or Brittany right here. It's good to see you. Guests, there's always a few. You could have been a lot of different places and you chose to be here, but thank you for being here. And I hope you just find a piece of paper or a visitor's card and write your information down. Just leave it on the pew. We'll get it later. It is good to see you. I'm proud to be here with you today. Would you stand? We'll be dismissed after this prayer. It is good to see you today. Randy, would you close us in prayer, please?